And now, the most offensive radio talk show host on the planet, Pete Santilli.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a slightly different introduction. This is somebody that I guess for the purposes of disclosure, I've talked to quite a bit since I left the Motel 6. But before that, I actually admired her work, as a journalist, as an investigative journalist that was covering my story as a co-defendant in this Bundy Ranch case. And I admired her work. I thought she was doing a pretty accurate job. I say pretty accurate. It was very accurate to the best of my ability. I wasn't in the courtroom during the trial. She was covering it. So I got her perspective on what was happening, and I appreciated it. Then when I came out, I got to know her a little bit better. And she, to me, seemed to be very, very thorough as she could possibly be with what limited information we have outside of these theories that we have as to who the cabal is trying to control us and to oppress us. And up in Idaho, in an area that they call the Redoubt, she actually started a website called RedoubtNews.com. And I didn't until recently discover what the Redoubt was. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce her to our listening audience here for the first time. In a lot of cases, for our listeners that don't know what the Redoubt is, they don't know what's happening in Idaho, they don't know who Shari Dovale is and why her work is so important on Redoubt News and why her work has been important since she formed this website. So I'm going to take a different approach and speak to her as if it was one of the first times that I've ever spoken to her, kind of, sort of. Her name is Shari Dovale. I love her work, and I love the fact that we get to introduce her to our listening audience. And guess what? Most importantly, if Idaho is doing things right in many different regards, I believe that we need to use those, I'll call it best practices. If they've got legislators that are defending the civil rights of the defendants in the Bundy Ranch case, and they're appealing to people in Washington, D.C., and they're doing so effectively, they had such a significant impact on it that Washington, D.C. paid attention. Well, we want to do that same thing in other states. We don't want to all move to Idaho. I don't think they have enough room, nor do we want a bunch of Californians in Idaho because they'll try to turn it into Idaho. But Shari Dovale joins me right now. Shari, are you there?
Yes, sir. I sure am. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Now, if you don't mind, I'm gonna guide us through this thing in a different fashion than probably you're used to hearing me, because way back before the whole Bundy Ranch thing, we've got 1,200 and something episodes. I've done a lot of interviews with people that I basically introduced them to our listening audience as to why it's so important that you hear from a particular guest. I believe that the work that you're doing right now is some of the most important work. The people that I've come into contact with through you, whether it be a constitutional attorney, whether it be an activist group, whether it be legislators up there in Idaho, I'm thinking to myself, man, Idaho is firing on all of those cylinders that every other state, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be doing. So we're talking to not just our listenership, but potentially federal government employees, potentially state legislatures in other states. And that's why I'm excited about this conversation we're going to have, Shari.
Well, thank you. You could have picked a better picture for me, though, I got to tell you.
I love that picture. Are you kidding me? No, I do. No, I love you, Shari. I mean, we're steak and potatoes people that, why? Because you're not wearing your suit and tie.
I'll send you some other pictures. They look better.
Put your hat on backwards. Huh? No. I said put your hat on backwards then, the next time you take a picture, like I have mine on.
That one I can do. I will definitely do that.
Yeah, Shari. So let's get to this. Let's start talking, and we'll get to the Bundy Ranch coverage or the Patriot issues that you're covering on your website. I want you to tell our listening audience, why the heck did you even start a website called RedoubtNews.com? Tell that story. Tell everyone.
Well, I had been doing some writing for some other news outlets, and we actually even had a website that was covering North Idaho. But we were an affiliate of another news outlet and had some, let's call it creative differences. They wanted us to follow an agenda that we weren't prepared to follow. So we left that one, and we prayed about it. And believe it or not, I was on the phone with Stuart Rhodes and told him about our issue because it really kind of centered around an interview that we had done with him. And we talked a lot about it, and he said, start your own website. And while he was on the phone, Brett started looking at domain names, and we had been talking about the Redoubt, so he went and looked up Redoubt News. It was available, and it was, a couple other things fell into place right there within minutes, and it was almost like a God thing. And, we've always done everything that we do because we feel like we're on God's mission. And this is his battle, and we're just doing what we're told. And that's how it all started. We were up and running within a couple of hours, and within a week, I was down in Burns covering everything there, and it just kind of took off from there.
A week after you set up your website, you were in Burns, and that was one of the first stories you covered?
Yep.
Wow. Now, the Redoubt, I'm just finding out, call me dumb as a box of paper clips. I wasn't paying attention to why the people up there in Idaho, the people out there in the Pacific Northwest, I would say outside of Portland over, of course, because Portland is just a communist entity in and of itself. But out there in that area, it's actually called the Redoubt. Explain what that is, because you did the other day. I heard it for the first time from you just the other day. But tell everyone what the Redoubt is.
Okay, well, the Redoubt, in its actual definition, is a stronghold, a place that you can defend, that you set up to be easily defended. The term got kind of recoined by James Wesley Rawls in his series of books called The Patriots, and he identified a geographical area: Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, eastern Washington, and eastern Oregon, as a place where like-minded, conservative, Christian, and Jewish people can live and basically live the self-sustaining lifestyle, conservative lifestyle that they all want to have. And again, it's just a group of like-minded people who kind of want to be left alone from the socialist agenda. Mm-hmm. Well, Idaho has turned into the heart of the Redoubt, and North Idaho is the heart of that. So we have really kind of taken things by storm. Idaho is known as the reddest state in the Union as far as their politics go. And it kind of all fits together. Again, the Redoubt is just a geographical area, but we have done so much here that people want to, label everybody, Redoubters, as anti-government, anti-constitution, anti-everything, to try and demonize us, but it's not that way. We are not anti-government. We are very pro-government, but we are pro-constitutional government, limited government, anti-corrupt government, such like that. And we have elected several Liberty legislators. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have a story coming out here within the next few days. We've got close to 30 more Liberty people on board to run in the next primary. We've got them doing some outstanding bills. They probably passed, I don't know, it could be upwards of 500 good bills here in the last week or two. I've got some interviews scheduled with some of the Liberty legislators, such as Heather Scott, Dorothy Moon, etc., to talk about some of these outstanding, amazing bills that they've been pushing through. And, we've covered a lot of the demonization that the establishment hacks have put on them, and it's starting to have an effect. These people are starting to get their bills through. The citizens are starting to have their voices heard, and they've even set up remote places around the country so that citizens can testify on the bills. and they don't have to travel all the way to Boise and do it on their agenda. They can do it, from nearby where they live.
You know what? I actually have on the screen as you're talking, and I'm thinking about this because when I say that I've been admiring what's been going on in Idaho, I'll tell you as a co-defendant in the Bundy Ranch case, we had legislators in Idaho because there were a couple of people, from Ammon Bundy to Todd Angle to Scott Drexler. And I don't want to exclude anybody, but Steve Stewart, but the guys from Idaho had legislators that were actively involved in getting to know the case and became huge advocates for defending their rights and conveying to not only the federal judiciary in Nevada, but also Washington, D.C., advocating for their rights. So when you say that there's liberty-minded legislators, these are legislators that are familiar with the Constitution. They're not anti-government. They're actually wanting to assume the roles of constitutional government by becoming public servants of the people in Idaho. Correct? Describe what you mean by those liberty-minded legislators.
Absolutely. They've been involved in the people's issues for a long time, since they've gotten elected. For example, in Burns, we had a handful of legislators go over there to talk to Ammon and the sheriff, etc. It wasn't just Matt Shea from Spokane Valley. We had Heather Scott, Sage Dixon, Judy Boyle. We had a bunch of them over there advocating for their citizens that were in Burns at the time. Mm-hmm. Then we had Dorothy Moon take the lead on the letter for Jeff Sessions and President Trump for the Nevada trials. We had more than half of the House in Boise sign that letter. Mm-hmm. They knew what was going on. They knew it was a miscarriage of justice.
Yes.
And they took it to Raul Labrador. He attached his own letter. They got it to Jeff Sessions. They are engaged and involved. When they see an issue that's important, they get engaged and they get involved, like the current CBD oil bill. Dorothy Moon presented that one. It's an important issue. We've got a lot of citizens in Idaho that really need CBD oil. But the governor has, and this is, I have to tell you, I have a lot of check mark lists here to tell me whether or not it's a good bill or a bad bill. And towards the top of my list is, does Governor Butch Otter like this bill or not? If he does not like the bill, odds are I want to look at it. It's probably good, because that Republican governor has turned into one of the most lefty guys I've ever seen.
And what's his name, by the way?
He made it known that he would not. I'm sorry?
What's his name?
Butch Otter.
Butch Otter.
Otter like water weasel.
That's funny. So anything he's...
Let it be known that he would not allow this bill to go through. He didn't care. He would veto it. We actually have enough votes, it's expected, to override a veto. But we had some establishment hacks go in there and kill the bill in the Senate committee. Senator Hyder, as a matter of fact, violated open meeting laws and took the committee into his office and closed the door and wouldn't allow reporters or anybody in there. But the AP reporter was really awesome and stood outside the door and listened to the yelling that was going on in there and reported exactly what was being said. And what he said was that the governor's office doesn't want this bill, the prosecutors don't want this bill, the Office on Drug Policy doesn't want this bill, and he wasn't going to allow the bill. He showed that he's working for the governor and not the people. And those are the people that our liberty legislators are trying to get out, and our people are trying to get out. They're draining the swamp in Idaho, and we're leading the nation on that. We are really having an effect on it.
Okay, so what you're describing here, and I'm asking the question I know the obvious answer to, what you're describing is not anti-government. Sounds like you have a very active government where you've got the people, the constituents, actively supporting, not just being activists, but supporting some of these, the liberty agenda, per se. And you've got people within the legislature that are trying to be as constitutional as they can within the government. That's not anti-government. That's of, by, and for our people, is it not?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have got liberty legislators that go around on a regular basis throughout the year. Now, most legislators, they have what we call a day job. They do something else throughout 9 months of the year, and 3 months they're in Boise. Our liberty legislators are actively engaged with the people throughout the year.
Yep,
Not just sending out letters. They go have town halls, they go to their meetings, they talk to them, they find out what it is they want, why they want it, and they fight for their citizens.
Stay right there. We're gonna go to a break and join you back with Shari Dovale from Redoubt News.
You're listening to The Pete Santilli Show. One small step for man, one giant leap towards the truth.
We're going to continue the discussion with Shari Dovale about what the state legislators are doing. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is not anti-government. This is exactly what we would want in our government. Legislators that are constitutional, that are defending the civil rights of their constituents, that are stepping up saying, you know what is right, what's wrong is wrong. And, of course, we conservatives believe that if somebody's out breaking the law, then you deserve to be held accountable. But if the constitutional law is being violated in violation of our civil rights, we've got legislators out there in Idaho that are stepping up for their constituents, and they're doing so very, very vigorously. I think there's a great relationship between the people up there, like-minded individuals that are pro-government by and for our people, of, by, and for our people. But Shari Dovale joins me from RedoubtNews.com because I want to have this discussion in front of our listening audience, no matter where you're at. If you're in New York, if you're in Vermont, Rhode Island, we're going to hear from Dan Bidandi. He's going to come on, and we're going to talk about what the people of Rhode Island have done in opposition to this gun-grabbing agenda. We need to replicate what they're doing up there in the Redoubt across the country because it's what's right for our country. It has a lot to do with how our nation was founded in leave me the heck aloneism, and denouncing any tyrannical, unconstitutional, in violation of our civil rights. The Constitution is not a radical concept, is it, Shari? Oh, hold on a second, Shari.
You wouldn't think it is anyway. It seems that our government has turned into what we originally fought against. And we need to get back to what the founders envisioned.
We do. And Shari, do you agree with me? We're going to talk more about the U.S. Constitution and how it's not a radical concept. But everyone knows that things are very wrong within Washington, D.C., within the Beltway especially, within politics, within economics, the relationship between government and big business, this anti-gun agenda. We're going to talk about guns here momentarily. But everyone knows that there's some very polarizing, wrong things that are happening in our country, from our education system to business to jobs, all the way around. So, if you say to yourself, well, how are we going to be able to fix this thing? Our founding fathers actually gave us all the tools that we need to go back to basics, haven't they?
Yes, they have. Yes.
So talk about, and I have put on the screen here, this one article that you have up, Hot Issues in Idaho Legislature. We're 40 days into the legislative session, and more than 500 bills have been printed. That is more than 12 bills per day. So many bills that the normal legislative rules are being suspended in order to expedite bills, a sure sign of growing government. Okay, I had the opportunity to eat lunch with Idaho State University ambassadors. You've got people from Idaho State. You've got people that are actively involved in this process with the legislators. This is not, again, I'm going to state it again. You are not promoting some anti-government agenda, are you?
No, we're not. That actually was written by one of our liberty legislators, Representative Priscilla Giddings. Mm-hmm. She's awesome. I get lots of updates. I talk to the legislators on a regular basis. They let me know everything going on, and they just impress the heck out of me. You know, they are really all over this. They're up at 4 a.m. They don't go to bed until close to midnight because all they do is work on what their constituents have asked them to work on.
That's awesome. And you have a very active citizenry. I want you to talk about, of course, I haven't had the opportunity, and I will at a certain point, to speak with people such as Andrea Parker, and I speak to Andrea Parker, but you did an interview with somebody who is actually trying to do his civic duty to get out there, and that is Eric Parker. Organizations like the Idaho 3 Percenters are so demonized for them wanting to be, I believe, a civic-minded organization that is actively involved with getting on the front steps of the local legislature, to work with the local sheriffs, to work with politicians in Boise. Tell us a little bit about those organizations that you've come into contact with. Patriot groups are not a bad thing, but they're doing good work out there, aren't they, in Idaho?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Redoubt News was built on citizen journalism and getting the people to contribute. And Eric Parker with the 3%, he is setting the bar, and it's going to be hard to beat. He is just doing an amazing job. He's very engaged, very active. And Andrea started this when Eric was on trial. She became a voice to be reckoned with. When they have something to say, it's important that y'all listen, because they have done their research. They do a lot of research. They talk to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. They know what the issues are. They know the pros and cons. And they don't agree with everybody, but they're willing to tell you what's going on. Like I say, the 3% is setting the standard. They not only are involved in politics and the political issues, but they're involved in their communities. And that's where it really begins, is making sure your community is taken care of, be it making sure they have enough wood in the winter to heat their home, or have enough food in their cupboard if they're having a hard time, or having an issue within their schools, if they, or an issue, you can bring up the grocery tax to him, and he's going to be able to tell you all about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Yeah. There is a whole group of people getting on board with him because, he's just done an amazing thing. He's only been out a few months, and he's already a voice to be reckoned with.
He is, really and I know him, much better than most, and I'll have plenty of opportunity to have everybody else, including, those people that they were told the wrong things about him and Scott Drexler and Steve Stewart and all those guys from Idaho, about them being, I believe that they're treasures of society. These are truly, I got to know these guys. But why am I mentioning this to our listening audience? Because when you say that they're doing the right things in Idaho and they're with the Patriot group, I believe that model, like with the Idaho 3 Percenters, is also a couple of other Patriot groups that I've been trying to encourage. Everyone across the country needs to be doing this stuff. This is volunteerism to the highest order. Are they paid by the government to go get on a bus and go to Boise, Idaho, to go, whether it be protest or to rally in support of a cause? Or are they doing it out of the goodness of their hearts because they believe in what they're doing? Are they supported by the government? Or George Soros? Of
course not. They do it because they believe in the people they live with and they live around.
Yes.
They believe in this country. They believe in the Constitution. They believe that this country can get back to what it was designed to do.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the whole purpose of this discussion, Shari. And you, from that story out there in Burns, that's right, you were thrown right into this, quote unquote, this patriot story. From Burns, Oregon, the Nevada trials, and you've tried to cover to the best of your ability to convey the truth about what was really going on. Now I'm going to ask you this from your perspective. When you were reporting on the trials, you were in the courtroom, correct? You were sitting there. You were listening to what was happening in the courtroom, correct?
Yes, I was there for every day of both Portland trials, and I missed the first Nevada trial because of that. but I was there every day for the second Nevada trial and quite a bit of the third.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're not going to, for the purposes of this discussion with Portland, I want you, let's exclude, the government, the agents, the story, so on and so forth. You have gotten to know the defendants, they're Americans, and you got to know the jury's reaction to the story, and you sat there in between. Okay? Did you notice that a jury of peers were sitting there and they were listening to the story and they're like, this is just not right all the way around. Why were they able to secure an acquittal in Portland, in your view?
The jury, as much as the prosecution and the judge tried to cherry pick that jury, they did not give enough credit to people to understand, real life. Mm-hmm. All right, these people, they have their own lives that this has affected, and they put themselves in this position. If they wanted to go to a rally, if they wanted to go to exercise their First Amendment rights, how is the government going to treat them? This is the perspective the jury was putting this whole case in. They're looking at the prosecution saying that we're not getting the whole story here, and they're looking at the defense saying they're not allowed to tell us what's going on. They can see this. Mm-hmm. If the defense is not putting on a defense, the jury's going to question why. Mm-hmm. It's not because they don't want to. Reasonable people know the right questions to ask, and this jury was a reasonable group of people. Mm-hmm. They asked the right questions, and there's no way that they can convict if they do that.
So you're reporting of, from your perspective of the truth. Okay, let's compare that to what the mainstream media was reporting about that trial. Was there a huge disparity between the two? Did you find that the mainstream media just wasn't conveying the right story? I know Maxine Bernstein, she did an okay job, considering she's a liberal journalist with that liberal bias a little bit. And I don't mean that in a negative way. They were in Portland. The whole jury was liberal. That's in a liberal area, and they actually acquitted. So I don't mean this in a negative light. But was the mainstream media getting the story wrong?
They always get the story wrong. Maxine is probably the best out of all of them, mm-hmm. but even she used all the liberal buzzwords to try and demonize the group, okay? Yeah. She morphed a little bit and straightened out a lot of her writing to where it was not quite as negative later on as it was in the beginning, mm-hmm. but she's still using the liberal buzzwords, mm-hmm. okay? She's still using the demonizing words. She's still calling things, by what the media has dictated it be called by, Mm-hmm. And even though she has done the better job, I don't read her stuff any more than I read anybody else's stuff out there on the mainstream media. I do touch base on it. I do want to keep up on it, but I can read one article and know what the next 20 are going to say because they all have the same narrative. And it's never the whole truth. It's always their agenda.
Is that why you're so passionate about being an independent media journalist with Redoubt News? What drives you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we don't get the people to step up and tell the truth, then nobody will. And that's what I try and do, and that's what I encourage everybody else to do. And that's why I encourage citizen journalism to send their stuff to me. And, of course, we have our guidelines as well as the next person, but we are trying to get more people throughout the Redoubt to contribute what's going on in their areas, what's going on in the constitutional violations throughout this country. Our focus has narrowed down to, mostly it's probably 80% constitutional violations in the country. And we're not going to learn about those if it's not from the citizens, because the mainstream media will not tell us this. It's the people that are standing on the street corners at their rally. It's the people that are holding their cell phones up and recording this stuff. And it's the people that are sitting in the courtrooms watching what is happening in there. Mm. They're the only ones who are going to be able to get the truth out because nobody else will. The government has their agenda, and they are 110% full steam ahead.
Are there any barriers to other people across the country like yourself that say, darn it, I'm going to, I'm being lied to through the media. I'm going to go out and try to seek the truth and share it with people to get into independent media? There aren't any barriers to setting up a website like you've done and to report the truth through your website, are there?
No, there isn't. As a matter of fact, it's so much easier now than it used to be, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. People were almost required to follow the media, the mainstream media in prior generations. But at the same time, it used to be a higher standard. I mean, you look at Walter Cronkite. He was the voice of the people. He was very liberal, but he kept most of that out of his reporting. You know, he really did try. He set a standard that the mainstream media now has no concept of. They look at it as their job is to tell the people what they need to think, not give the people the information and let them disseminate it themselves. Their job is to instruct people how to think. And that's why we have so much socialism propaganda in this country, is because the mainstream media are the ones that are insisting that the people have to think the way they tell them to. And it's going to take citizens stepping up, and if they don't want to set up their own website, there are people that are willing to take their stories and take their articles and promote it for them. But it's going to take that to get the truth out there.
You know, I think that, and we're going to get interrupted by a break here, and we'll continue the discussion. In the next segment, I want to talk about Second Amendment issues. But, you know, when I had discussions with people, and I was a journalist on the ground, I was live streaming in Burns for an entire month. And I was reporting the truth to the best of my ability. I had discussions with mainstream media, and they said, "Oh, we're not biased." And I said, "I'm biased. I'm biased in favor of the U.S. Constitution, the American people, and these protesters who I believe don't deserve to be shot and killed. I am biased. I have to push through that. And any journalist that says that they're not biased is lying." And I think that those old days of Walter Cronkite being an objective, unbiased journalist, those days are gone. That we have to, on the right side of the political spectrum, I believe that we have no choice but to be biased in favor of our views and our principles to counter the bias that comes from the people that say that they don't have bias. And that gets kind of dangerous, doesn't it? But isn't it true that we have to be somewhat biased in opposition to what's coming at us in the mainstream media?
I do not hide the fact that I'm very conservative, and I write with a conservative slant. I don't hide that. But at the same time, I don't hide what the other side is saying. I just counter it with my commentary.
Okay, good. Now, when we come back after this next break, I do want to talk about Second Amendment issues. I covered a topic about the schools using the children to promote this anti-gun agenda, and I know you can do this very responsibly. Let's talk about how important it is for national security to defend our Second Amendment rights. We'll be back right after this. You know, so how do we counter? We have no choice to counter liberal bias in the media, the propagandization that's happening in the media. We must counter it. If you're a conservative, if you are a constitutionalist, that's how you do that, with your voice. You step out there. You can't sit there as a consumer of information and say, "Well, I'm being lied to. Oh my goodness, they're trying to take my guns away. Oh my goodness, the Second Amendment. Oh my goodness, the children. Oh my goodness, the whole world is coming." It's time for us to step up and do, and this is why I wanted Shari on the show with me, is that if we can use Idaho as a best practice for what everyone else in the country needs to do, I believe that there will be this grand awakening, because guess what? I don't think that Ohio, there are some liberal areas in Ohio, but I don't think that in New York, the entire state of New York is represented well by a liberal New York City. There is a silent majority that exists in the backwoods of New York, up in Plattsburgh, in Rochester, and they have just down-home steak and potatoes views. They're hardworking people in Buffalo, steak and potatoes people out there in Idaho, that need to come out of their homes and get with your legislators. And if you don't like your legislature, then fire them and replace them with people that you do like. But it requires some activity. It requires a little bit of work, doesn't it, Shari?
Yes, it does.
It
Quite
does.
A bit of work.
It's a lot of work. Now let's transition, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the following regard. You and I could have a discussion for the next 5 hours as to what is happening with this gun grabbing agenda and what layers and level of our government, of our big business. There is I believe, to be a grand conspiracy going on right now to take away assault weapons. We hear it right now. They're using our schools, our children. They're using events, very real events. The killing of children with assault rifles is a terrible event. But let's transition and describe to people that are against assault. I'm against a child being shot with an assault rifle. I'm against that. But I'm also very aware of the fact that there's an agenda to take away assault rifles so that we can have this imbalance, just like back in the day when England had all of the muskets and the people had pea shooters, that was an imbalance of power that was not good. Our Second Amendment, Shari, I want you to speak to it. Do you believe, based on the research you've done, that our founding fathers, as Deb described it, set up a scenario to where we would have a balance of power, that if the government has assault rifles, the people must have assault rifles in order for there to be peace and balance and harmony between the people and their government? Yes or no?
Absolutely. They wanted the people to be equal with the government. As a matter of fact, during the Revolutionary War, the people provided their own weapons. It was not government provided. It was not, the founders that provided any weapons. The people provided their own weapons.
Mm-hmm.
When they went and fought the Redcoats.
Mm-hmm.
And it continued on like that for years. The Civil War, people were providing their own weapons. If they were going to go fight, they had to bring a weapon. They provided everything. Now, even the military is being demonized. They bring you in, they train you to be a killer, and they let you go and call you a killer and say you're mentally unstable. The people have to have a balance against the government. They have to be able to defend themselves on any issue, be it the government, be it, an outside invader. They have to be able to defend themselves. That is a God-given right.
And as it relates to Second Amendment issues, okay, like if we were to solve the problem, because I want to solve the problem of a 19-year-old grabbing an assault rifle or a bazooka or a nuke or a tank or a pea shooter and going and harming other individuals. But do you believe, based on what you've seen, that the bigger problem is the AR-15, or is it the pharmaceuticals that these kids are on that causes them to do stupid stuff? Notice they don't mention anything about all these pharmaceuticals. Like with our veterans, they teach them to go kill in the war theater in the Middle East. And when they come back, they say, oh, my goodness, you're a killer. You're unstable. You have PTSD. Take these psychotropic drugs, which makes you homicidal and suicidal. Are we not having an open and honest discussion about pharmaceuticals? Do you think that's a big problem?
That is the bigger discussion, and that is the one that needs to come to the forefront of this country.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the weapons. I mean, they're not talking about knives. They're not going to ban knives because somebody goes in and stabs, a dozen people. They're not going to ban that. They're not going to ban cars when somebody goes and drives through a mall. They're not going to ban anything else. They're using this as part of their agenda to take all defense away from the citizens. And they are hooking them in with these psychotropics, okay? That is what's making people go a little nuts. The big pharma has got more control over this country than any legislator that you could name.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the corporate interests that are behind this propaganda campaign, this thing. Now, did you hear me read that letter from Beaver Creek School? Do you agree with me that there is a massive conspiracy, which includes the Department of people within the Department of Education, that's going along with this corporate / leftist gun-grabbing agenda, that you can't just whip up a national campaign with a walkout with kids. You can't just whip that up without spending tens of millions of dollars to reach that many people for a massive protest on the 14th. And that's not, you can't do it without a lot of money and without a lot of support. And you can't do it without the grassroots. This is not a grassroots thing that's taking place on March 14th, is it?
No, I didn't hear the letter, but I can tell you, you're absolutely right. It's not grassroots. I was an activist in high school. You know, just organizing a march through my school, you know, took an awful lot of effort because I didn't know how to go about it. I was still learning. As far as who is controlling this, can we all say George Soros?
Yeah, George Soros. All of that money that comes from entities like George Soros. We've got Gucci. Are you tracking the money and where this is coming from that's being pumped into this March 14th walkout? They're now literally sending letters from the principals of these schools to the parents. They're telling the parents, you can't even come to school for these protests. We want your child to be expressive in violation of, you know, our Second Amendment rights, of course, of everybody else. But we want them to be expressive. We're going to support a walkout. But since when does a school support a walkout? Since when?
Well, they certainly won't do it if they're against abortion. You know, they've already said that. But I'll tell you what, Redoubt News is going to have several people at different areas around the state and hopefully around the Redoubt in the country, live streaming these walkouts so people can see how stupid it's getting.
Yeah.
You know, we've already got a couple of people lined up, and we're trying to get some more, and we're going to expose it. We're going to show that these kids don't really know what they're talking about, and they're being controlled. It's all indoctrination.
Yeah. Now, Shari, talk about and share with the rest of the country. I know the answer to this question, but I want you to express it. What is the attitude of people in Idaho and in the Redoubt throughout about our Second Amendment rights and how important they are to keeping, you know, being necessary to a free state? What are the attitudes of the people in the Redoubt with respect to the Second Amendment?
Well, last year, Idaho passed constitutional carry. They do not need permission to carry a concealed weapon in the state of Idaho. And that's the attitude in this state and throughout the Redoubt. They all want it. Everybody believes the Second Amendment, you know, is, you know, just a guarantee of the God-given right to protect yourself, to carry a weapon. They don't care what kind of weapon it is. They just say, you know, it's my right. I'm going to do it. I don't need permission, period.
Mm-hmm. And it's taken a while to establish a relationship with the state. Well, first of all, replacing the legislators that are anti-Second Amendment with pro-Second Amendment legislators. But it's not a radical concept up there to be pro-Second Amendment, is it?
No, it's a normal concept. That's part of why they move here. They want their rights, and that includes the Second Amendment. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a discussion about, I forget who it was, someone on Fox News that said, you know, the people from California, they'll leave California and move to Texas, and they're trying to turn Texas into California. They're trying to, you know what I mean, to change all the good reasons why you would want to move to Texas. Do you find that a lot of people are moving to Idaho and that things are changing? People are importing you know, their bad liberal views, or are you guys holding firm?
No, we definitely have that movement here. We have, not only are we the reddest state in the nation, we are now the fastest growing state in the nation.
Is it really?
That came out just a couple of weeks ago. They are moving in from the blue areas, the occupied territories of California and Portland, etc., and they are trying to change our laws to suit the other blue areas in this country. And we are in a battle. We are fighting it. And so far we're holding firm, but, you know, we just need everybody to stay engaged. That's the only way we're going to win this battle.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to stay engaged with sharing information like this with, I mean, if we can actually cause every other state to become as constitutional as Idaho is, then you wouldn't have an influx of immigrants, we'll say, to Idaho. Why not make New York constitutional instead of being such a victim and sitting there? Use Idaho as a test bed for what you need to do in your own state. Ohio is doing a halfway decent job, but we've got our issues here. Shari, tell us about what in the remaining moments that we have here. What kind of stories are you working on these days? And I'm going to have you on a regular basis to talk about those important stories that you work on. You always say, I'm working on a ton of them. But tell us about the most important ones that are going to be coming down the pike there, published on Redoubt News.
Well, there's going to be quite a few on the bills that they're passing down in Boise, and the ones that they're trying to pass and getting, fighting. We've got Representative Nate, who has put through a bill that looks very positive on firearm safety education in public schools.
Oh, wow.
We've got them trying to repeal Common Core. We've got...
hold on one second. Repealing Common Core to be replaced by what?
Well, they're going to give that control back to the local school districts.
Okay, good.
I'm going to have more on that one coming up. Stay tuned for that. But they do have a bill in there that will repeal Common Core. The biggest problem that people have on that is they're going to lose the federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the problem with everything. The carrot is all the federal money.
Yeah, it's an addiction.
That also goes back to the land issues, because if we had control of all of our lands, we wouldn't need any federal funding.
That's exactly right.
We wouldn't have any property tax in this state if we were able to take care of our own lands.
Yeah,
people wouldn't be paying out the nose for anything because the state would have more than enough money.
Now, is everyone aware? Are you personally aware of the pitfalls of the choice? Because of the whole bait and switch thing, getting rid of Common Core. I don't believe that the solution is charter schools. Is everyone aware of the pitfalls of the charter school system as well? Are you aware? Because if you're not, I'm going to share some information with you, of course.
Well, I want you to share it anyway.
Uh-huh.
I do know that there are some problems with charter schools. Most of them are not what people think they are. They are still public schools, and they still have an agenda that they have to follow. Out here, most people are promoting homeschooling. That is the biggest thing. Now, there are some charter schools that I am totally impressed with.
Mm-hmm.
They are more like private schools, and they don't take the federal they do take some federal money to be called a charter school versus a private school. But they are also, there are several that are very Christian, and they're following those tenets, and et cetera. But, again, the homeschooling is what is promoted in a bigger way out here than charter schools.
Awesome. Listen, we'll in the future, we want to share as much of your work. You are engaged with your local politicians. You're engaged with the people. You're very, very passionate about the work that's being done up there in Idaho. And I have absolutely zero problems at all sharing your success stories. You guys have success stories out there that I believe the other parts of the country need to follow after. This is the main reason for this discussion. I've said it over and over again. But everyone needs to go to readoutnews.com, learn from what they're doing out there, and try to implement it in your own community, so that way you don't have to move to Idaho, right? Yes,
well,
that's right.
We do have a lot of space, but we like it that way.
Yep. Shari, thank you so much for coming on. I'll have you on a regular basis, especially as you publish some very important work. I believe you're one of the most important investigative journalists in independent media right now. And thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to having you on the next time. Everyone stay right there. Third hour coming up. We're going to cover more important news stories right after this break, ladies and gentlemen. You know what? We, the people, can come together. We have all of the tools. It's not a radical concept to go back to basics, to recognize what made us such a great country, go back to that, and to push back on this Marxist agenda. It's not a difficult thing to do. I'm optimistic we can do it together. We'll be right back right after the top of the hour news break.